Here I have a 2016 Hyundai Sonata Hybrid, and as you can see we have an issue where the key fob does not want to unlock the door. The door only unlocks from the inside, and you can see how that becomes extremely frustrating. So let's go ahead and fix this issue. Unfortunately, it's not an easy one. There is a lot of work involved. It's actually this door latch right here that's the bad part. So here goes the part number, and I highly recommend using original parts for this. For something like this, you don't want to go aftermarket. Let's start by removing that plastic plug, and we can put our socket in here. The bolt won't actually come out. You just have to keep unscrewing it until it's no longer holding onto the door handle. As you can see, I'm using a small prying tool, a plastic one, to get behind the door handle. And now you want to pull out the door handle a little bit, and this piece should just slide right out with no issues at all. It comes off pretty easy actually. Grab the door handle, push it towards the rear of the car, and as you can see, this part's gonna unlatch, and then we're gonna pull the other end out. And be careful because it does have a wire going to it, so we're just gonna go ahead and unplug the harness. And that's actually all that's involved for removing the door handle. So if you want to replace your door handle, that's how easy it is. Don't forget to remove these little plastic what I like to call gaskets. There should be another one on the other side, but mine stood attached to the actual door handle. So let's go ahead and remove the screw. You could either use a socket here or a Phillips screwdriver. I prefer the socket because if it slips, you have less chances of scratching your paint rather than using a screwdriver. Now we can remove the 3 torque screws that are holding on the door latch, so let's go ahead and get these out of the way. Here I'm using a slim prying tool to get behind this piece of plastic that's behind the door handle, and it should pop out pretty easy. There's one Phillips screw behind here that we have to remove. Next we need to remove this rubber pad that's right here on the door panel, and again there's another Phillips screw underneath this, so we're gonna go ahead and remove that. And that's it for the screws. Let's go ahead and pop off this small trim that's in the corner. It simply just pops right off with your hands, no big issue. And now you're just gonna kind of get your fingers in behind the door panel, and it's just held in with a bunch of pop-in clips, so just some real light tugs on it and the panel should come right off just like I did here. And then you're gonna lift it up slightly and reach behind it to start disconnecting everything. Now this comes off pretty easy. There's a small tab right here. You just press in on that tab and it detaches the entire assembly, so that's pretty neat that Hyundai came up with that idea right there. Now there's going to be 3 connectors that we have to disconnect. There's going to be 2 up here going to the window switches, and there's 1 on the bottom that I just took off right now. I think it's for like a door light. Now let's go ahead and remove these 2 plugs right here. It's basically like an access hole to the bolts for the window glass. Window glass? Is that a thing? Window glass. Sounds weird to me. Anyway, so once we get them out of the way, if you look inside there, you can see we don't see any of the bolts, and that's because the glass isn't in the correct position. So we're going to go ahead and plug in the window switch. Is why I have the complete door panel with me, and I powered on the vehicle. And as you can see, I'm just raising or lowering the glass on the car until the bolts line up, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So now you can see I moved the glass in the correct position. Now we have access to the 2 10mm bolts. And let's go ahead and remove this trim right here. Get this out of the way. Pops out pretty easy. And now this one on the left side, you do not want to remove it completely. All you have to do is loosen it and leave it like that. And the bolt on the right side, this is the one that you have to remove completely. Now at this point, if one of these bolts falls inside of the door, it's not really a big issue because this whole door panel is going to be coming apart anyway, and you're going to have access to it. Now it's time to remove the glass. You want to tilt the glass upward so it looks like it's pointing into the sky, just like that. That's going to be the correct angle to get this thing out of the door. And make sure you have a death grip on this thing, because if you drop your glass, you're going to have a bad day. Now there's a series of 10mm bolts that go all around this door panel, and I'm just using my impact gun to speed up the process. With that done, we should be able to remove everything now as one giant assembly, because now we have the door panel disconnected, the door latch disconnected, and the door handle. So it all should come out as one big piece. Since this whole assembly is still connected to the car because of the wire harness, I don't want it just hanging here and putting stress on that harness. So I'm just gonna grab whatever I can around here, and you can see I just found a box, and I'm gonna use it to hold up the door panel to not put any stress on that wire harness. Now we could grab the brand new part and compare it to the one that's on the car and make sure it matches up. So everything looks pretty good to me and it matches up. I'm just gonna start by removing this wire harness right here. It just pops off pretty easy. There's one plug underneath this, so don't forget to unplug that. We have to remove this piece of plastic that goes onto the interior door handle, so it pops off pretty easy. You're just going to detach the two cables that go to it, and if you turn them at a slight angle, it lets you take out the cable out of this plastic cage, if you will. So we got to put that aside, make sure you save it. And if you look at your new part, the only thing that's included is anything that's black plastic or yellow plastic. Anything that's white is going to stay attached to the car, so we have to remove all of those things. And what I found to be really helpful here is a flathead screwdriver. So as you can see, I disconnected the first piece of plastic that's white, and that's attached to the door panel. Now we got to remove the rest of the plastic that's going to go to the door handle, and again, the screwdriver really helps here to separate everything. This cable with the blue foam on it is supplied on the new part, so we're going to have to go ahead and disconnect it from the white plastic that goes to the outside door handle. So it simply just pops right out of here and unhooks from the outside door handle assembly. And just put this aside so it doesn't hang. As you can see, I just put it inside the door right there. And now we could finally fish out our part and remove the old one. And here goes our prize. All that work just to get this piece out of here. Now it's time to install the new part, and as you can see on each of the cables it has like these little rubber grommets. You want to make sure those things seal, so I spent a few minutes to make sure they were in there properly. And now let's just go ahead and start clipping all of these plastics back together. They actually go together a lot easier than they come apart, so go ahead and pop that in. And then we could grab the other white plastic, the one that goes to the exterior door handle, and the first thing we're actually going to do is attach that cable, the one with the blue foam on it right there. Remember, we have to bend it over, hook it onto the door handle latch, and then pop it in. Once all of that is done, of course, do not forget to plug it back in, or else you're going to be taking all of this back apart again. So make sure it's plugged in, and we're just going to reroute our wire harness and put it back where it's supposed to be, which is a little bit tricky, but eventually it got in there. And now, before we go any further, let's go ahead and test the system. So I'm using my screwdriver here to simulate the car being closed, and the car thinks by hitting this button, it thinks that the door is now locked. Now this lever back here is the same thing like if you were to pull your exterior door handle. So as you can see, I'm applying pressure and the car is locked right now, so opening the door handle, it doesn't want to release the screwdriver, signifying a locked car. Okay, so let's go ahead, hit the unlock button. Let's put the screwdriver back in here, and this time when we pull the door handle, it should release the screwdriver just how it did. So we know everything's working, and you could feel confident putting everything back together.
I found a diamond.
You found a diamond? You're making more money than I am. Let me see.
But I found one diamond.
You found one diamond?
Yeah.
Let's look at it. Here you go. That's a nice diamond. Go find more for me, okay?
Oh, can you put them in my box?
Yeah, put them all in your box. Alright, thank you. You dropped your diamond? And I could reinstall that plastic cage that goes right at the end of the two cables. And with that piece on, this whole assembly is pretty much ready to go back on the car as one big piece. And I'm just going to grab a few of the 10mm bolts and put them in place just to kind of hold the door panel in place. I'm not going to tighten any of this stuff down just yet because I want to make sure everything is in its correct location. With all of the bolts in place, now I can tighten all of them down, and I'm using an impact gun, but I'm going really easy on them because remember, this is just plastic. You don't need to overkill any of this stuff. And these 3 bolts right here for the door latch had some thread locker on it from factory, so it's why I put a dab of blue thread locker on each of these bolts. And I'm going to use my hand ratchet to snug everything down. Now it's time to line up the inner plastic for the exterior door handle. Now this thing, it's hard to show on camera, but if you're actually doing this yourself, you'll notice that it has like little hooks on it. So that's what you have to latch on in order to get that white piece of plastic on the inside to stay in place. And once it's in place, of course, go ahead and snug down this bolt. Again, don't overkill it. You're just screwing into plastic. Don't forget about the 2 gaskets. There's one right here and there's another one on the left side, but mine is still attached to the door handle. And go ahead and plug in that electrical connector right there, and then we could just start to feed in the door handle, of course. So we're gonna start by putting in the left side right here, and the right side just kind of swoop around, and it's gonna latch onto the piece of plastic that's inside of the door. And if you push it forward, you'll feel it grab on, and if you try to open up the door handle, you're gonna feel like that spring tension, and that's how you know you're in the right place. Before you try to put in the lock assembly, just put your finger inside of there and push that bolt all the way out as far as it'll go, and then you're gonna pull on the door handle just to give you some clearance to get the lock in. And this really should just fall in pretty easy. It's one of the easier things to do on this car. So there you go, it fell in place. And now just go ahead and tighten down that 8mm bolt that's inside of there. Now that most of the stuff is put back together, we're going to go ahead and test the system. Again, I cannot stress it enough. Test as much as you can before you actually close this door, because it's very easy to forget to connect something, and then once you latch that door, it's locked, and sometimes you have to start breaking things just to get the door back open. It turns into a nightmare. I've been down that road. Trust me, test as much as you can before you commit to closing your door. So let's grab the glass, and very carefully, okay? Remember, death grip. Get the tightest grip you can on this glass. Make sure your hands are nice and dry. You don't want it slipping out of your hands or anything. So again, we're going to go in at an angle and slowly descend the glass where it belongs, and it's going to fall right into its place. You should not have to force this thing to go in. It should just kind of fall right into place. That's how you know you have it aligned properly. And once it goes down far enough, it's going to line up with the 2 holes that are in the door panel right there, so you can see the bolts and put the bolts back in. Now remember, the bolt on the left side is still sitting there because you should not have removed that one completely. All you have to do is tighten it down at this point, and then you have to put the bolt in the right hole over here. Now this one had a little bit of thread locker when I took it off. That's why I put another dab of blue thread locker on there. And this one you got to be careful with, because it is possible to drop this bolt inside of the door panel right now. And if you drop it in there, that's going to suck, because that means you have to take everything back apart again. So be really careful when you're putting that bolt back in. Now that we put the glass in, guess what I'm going to do next? That's right, more testing. Just make sure it goes all the way up and down with no issues at all. There's nothing obstructing it, and everything seems to be really good here. So let's go ahead and put this weather strip back in before you forget. This is the easy part to forget. So we'll pop this back in, and then we are pretty much all set to get the door panel and put it back on the car. With the door panel in place, I made sure to plug in the 3 electrical connectors. And now you can move on to the actual cables for the lock and the door handle. You may have to move the lock and the door handle a little bit, you know, kind of mess with it in order to get everything to line up. But eventually it'll allow you to clip in this entire assembly back here. And that's it. It pops right in pretty easy. And now we could just go ahead and put the door panel back on it. And of course, just a little bit more testing just to make sure everything's 100% at this point. Testing the outside door handle when it's locked, unlocked. Testing the inside door handle when it's locked and unlocked. And even testing the little button that's right there on the door handle. I did try that as well. So everything looks like it's really good here. So now I can just put the final touches on and wrap this thing up. So everything is all set here, everything works great. I'm just gonna go ahead, clean up the glass, and I'll clean up the interior trim right on the door panel where I was touching with my dirty paws to get everything nice and clean for the owner when he comes to pick it up. And the car looks great. So yeah, that's it. I appreciate you guys watching, and if you liked the video, if the video helped you, please give it a thumbs up, and thanks for watching.